As if you're a regular part of our audience, you're very familiar with our take on judicial leniency in the state. You're very familiar with the fact that we have been calling out judges. We've been calling out state lawmakers who elect those judges, calling out prosecutors. And the whole goal of that effort is accountability. It's to make South Carolina's justice system work, to actually spit out justice, because again, that's what it's supposed to do. What we have, unfortunately, is an injustice system where child sex offenders, serial rapists, murderers, attempted murderers, other violent criminals are just, let back on the streets with no consequence. And we wonder, as that happens, why violent crime in the Palmetto State continues to escalate. So I thought today, in the aftermath of yet another egregious instance of judicial leniency, and I'm referring to a suspect in a mass shooting at the Columbiana Center Mall. This guy was involved in a previous, he was convicted of accessory before the fact in a 2018 murder, basically a gang gunfight in Lower Richland, South Carolina. Was carrying a weapon illegally at the mall. Again, we don't know this individual's entire role in this mass shooting at Columbiana Center over the weekend that left 9 people with gunshot wounds, another 5 wounded with other injuries. It's a miracle nobody died, people. Miracle. We don't know this person's exact role, but we do know that he was represented by South Carolina Minority Leader Todd Rutherford, who always seems to be at the middle of these cases. But then again, you've got Senate Minority Leader Brad Hutto, who's at the center of another egregious story, and that's again the saga of Bowen Turner, the accused teen rapist down in Orangeburg, who was accused of raping 3 women, yet pled guilty to 1 charge of assault, and was allowed to walk out of a courtroom. No jail time. Doesn't even have to register as a sex offender. But again, the purpose of this video isn't to go into all these stories. The purpose of this video is to say, what should we do about this problem? Because it keeps happening. And the more that I speak with the families of victims, the more I speak with victims advocates, the more I speak with people who are just fearful, of the kind of society that we're living in, where public safety has just become, a secondary concern to this woke conception of justice. How do we fix it? How do we reorient this thing so that we get back to a justice system that actually protects victims, that actually promotes public safety, that actually does its job for a change? And there's a few things I wanted to talk about on that subject today. The first thing, it is time for South Carolina to elect its judges. Past time. Now, is this a perfect system? No, it's not. Just look at elections in South Carolina and some of the people who've been put in office, and you'll see it's not a perfect system. But anything is better than the current system that we have. And again, I want to draw attention to this. South Carolina is one of only 2 states in America where the legislature, state lawmakers, elect judges. In fact, it's even worse here because not only do state lawmakers elect judges, they get to pick who stands for election. They get to pick who gets to run in the first place through their little judicial merit screening committee. And their powerful lawmakers exert untold influence over the judicial system in this state. How's that working? Look at the violent crime rate, people. And look at the people who continue to reoffend and reoffend. Sheriff Leon Lott, I've criticized him in the past, but he's got a great statement on this. He calls it catch and release. And people, that is exactly what's happening in South Carolina. And we saw it at the mall shooting last week. We see it over and over again, not just in Richland County, but across the state. So again, let's start electing judges. But again, I want to bring up a very important distinction here. For the last decade, my news outlet has argued South Carolina needs recall elections. Recall elections like they have in California. One of the very few things that California actually does right. Recall elections. So that every year voters have an opportunity. If there's a case like this where a judge pulls a stunt like some of the judges in South Carolina have been pulling, voters have an opportunity to hold them accountable directly at the ballot box the very next year. The very next year. No 2-year, no 4-year, every year. Recall elections, people. And you know what? We don't just need it for our judges. We need it for our politicians who continue to put these judges in power. That's accountability. That's accountability. But again, anything is better than the current system where lawmakers elect judges and then go before those judges to get the favors that they think they're owed. We also need to look at bond, folks. Bond in this state is out of control. Murderers and attempted murderers are literally being turned out on the street. Ridiculously low bond amounts. Sometimes personal recognizance, but more often surety bonds where they literally have to post 1/10 of it. And even if that's a big amount, they can finance it through these bail bonding companies. So you see these numbers in the paper, 100,000 bond. Well, never mind that 80,000 of it was personal recognizance, which means you don't have to pay any of it. And the other 20,000 is a surety bond, and you only have to pay 10% of that, which is 2,000, and you can finance that out over however many years. So for a few dollars a month, criminals are just walking back out. We need to set higher bonds. There needs to be absolutely no wiggle room. If a bond is $100,000, it needs to be paid. $100,000. Otherwise, that criminal sits in prison. Sentencing reform. This is another one. We did a story on it earlier this month about a judge in Columbia shaving off 2 years of a mandatory minimum sentence. And you start to think, mandatory minimum. We thought that meant something, didn't we? Nope. Not in South Carolina. Apparently in South Carolina, you can take time off of mandatory minimum sentences, which makes me wonder, why the hell are we calling them mandatory minimums? Just like bond, on the sentencing front, we need a top-to-bottom rewriting, a reinvention of our current code. And I've talked to several solicitors about this, starting with murder. Currently, South Carolina is one of only a few states in the country where there is no such thing as first-degree murder. There's just murder, and then manslaughter, and then involuntary manslaughter. We need categories that reflect the wide range of different crimes that take people's lives, and we need tough sentences, mandated sentences, when people take other people's lives. So again, elect judges, reform bond, fix our sentencing, but there's another thing we have to do. South Carolina's docket is an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. And I've talked a lot about these violent criminals and about the need to keep them locked up, which we absolutely need to do. But guess what? They do deserve their day in court. Look, I'm a libertarian. These people deserve a speedy trial, and they're not getting it in South Carolina. And I do hear from defense attorneys every time I bring up the bond issue, every time I bring up the sentences, they say, well, Will, they got a right to speedy trial. And you know what they do? And they're not getting that in South Carolina because the Supreme Court, ever since it took over the docket, took it away from solicitors. It has been a disaster. This is another issue FITSNews has focused on extensively. So that's another thing that's got to be fixed. I mean, this system is broken, people. We wonder why we have a systemic failure of our judicial system, and it's because it is utterly and completely broken. So what can you do as a voter? What can you do as a citizen? Well, I'll tell you can do a few things. Number one, no more votes for lawmakers who elect these judges. And we're going to start pulling every judicial vote, every vote for these judges. We're going to show you exactly who voted to elect them. And again, maybe some of these lawmakers can say, well, we didn't know then, but guess what? You know now. you know now. And we're going to show for every one of these bonds, we're not only going to identify the judge, but we're going to show you who voted for him, who's backing them, why they're in power. And we're also going to continue to hold accountable these lawyer legislators who get preferential treatment for their clients. Again, I understand everyone has a right to the best possible representation that they can have. Again, I'm a libertarian. I believe that to my core. But that's not what's happening in South Carolina. What's happening in South Carolina is politically connected attorneys who are responsible for putting the judges in those seats, for giving them huge salary increases and budget increases. These are the people then coming before those judges. No. That's not a vigorous defense, as Senator Brad Hutto recently said. That's gaming the system, people. That's gaming the system, and it has to stop. But ultimately, this is up to state lawmakers. They're the ones with the power over the judicial branch right now. They're the ones that would have to statutorily change the bonds, the sentences. And I'll tell you what it's up to them to do. Not just vote for bills addressing all these problems, but to sponsor those bills, to agree to procedurally support them through any of these games that lawmakers like to play with amendments and crossover dates and all this other procedural BS. No, none of that. These reforms are too important. As you go to the voting booth, as you think about who you're going to vote for in June in the partisan primaries and in November, I want you to think about this. I want you to think about the countless victims who are being re-victimized by our injustice system. I want you to think about them. We've been telling their stories, and we've been telling the stories of the judges and the prosecutors who've been letting them go. But it's time for you to hold the people who are truly accountable for it, the lawmakers. It's time for you to hold them accountable. And the only way you can do that is not to give away your vote to lawmakers who are enabling and accommodating these judges, who are in turn enabling and accommodating these criminals. You want a safer state, people? You want a state where it's safe to live, to work, raise a family? Stop giving your vote away to politicians who are enabling this travesty, this joke of the justice system that we have in South Carolina. Because guess what? It may not be today, it may not be tomorrow, but one day it's going to be you, a member of your family, somebody at your church, somebody at your school, somebody at your place of work. It's going to be them that gets victimized. And they're going to go to this system and they're going to want justice. But you know what they're going to get in return? They're going to get the bare minimum, if that. And that's assuming there's not some powerful lawyer legislator on the other side of the case. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let it happen to one of your friends or your family members. Stand up now. Don't give away your vote to any lawmaker who's going to accommodate this system for one day longer.